I think we're letting our friends in online. So I'll take a second while they're coming into the Zoom room. I think we got about 50 plus people. Welcome everyone to our event tonight, to our deliberative forum and roundtable discussion on guns in America. How should we balance concerns about gun risks and gun rights? My name is Graham Bullock, and I'm an associate professor here at Davidson College in political science, and also the faculty director of the Deliberative Citizenship Initiative. We're one of the sponsors of this evening's event. We're happy to be co-sponsoring this event with several other organizations, including the Center for Political Engagement, the College Democrats, the College Libertarians, the College Republicans, and also the Political Science Department. And this is actually our 13th forum, who's counting, that we've done in the last 4 years. And our third forum in person with panelists in person, and our first forum with this format, with some technology in the middle of a roundtable that allows both all of our in-person friends and our online friends to join in and listen into our conversation. It will be followed by an opportunity for all of you to talk about this important topic together. Before we get started though, I'd like to ask you all to complete the short survey that has been copied into the chat online and is also on the table in front of you. So if you see the QR code, you can take out your phone and scan that. Just turn on your camera, point it at it, a link will come up, and you'll be able to complete our short little pre-survey. Afterwards, we're going to ask you to complete a post-survey about the event that's on the reverse side of that piece of paper. And then we'll also share another link with you guys in the chat. So before we also get started, I wanted to share a little bit about the Deliberative Citizenship Initiative, the DCI, which has been going since 2020. And our mission is to create opportunities like these for all of you to engage with each other, with students, faculty, staff, alumni, and community members about really difficult, contentious, and challenging topics facing our broader society as well as our local communities. And guns is, of course, one of these issues. How should we balance concerns about gun rights and gun risks is, one of perhaps the most contentious issues in our society today. As well-meaning and well-informed people can differ about the benefits and drawbacks of these technologies. So to help us better understand and explore these diverse perspectives, we've paired a fantastic panel of experts and advocates on this topic with this opportunity for you all to talk with one another around your roundtables and also in breakout groups after the panel. And we have about 20 trained facilitators, mostly students, who are here to help moderate those conversations. And they're either at your tables now or in the Zoom room with you online. And I'd like actually for all of our facilitators just to stand up right now who are in the room so you can see who they are. And then online you'll be able to meet your facilitators there. The other thing is we have a deliberation guide that we've shared with you all that should be in your emails and on the tables in front of you that you can use. And also for those online, if you can't find it in one of the many emails I sent you, it's also on our website, and we'll share it in the chat right now that you can find that under upcoming events. So I also want to recognize two people kind of behind the scenes working on this. We have several important moderators. So Adam Barton is in the back helping with Zoom, and Dr. Sarah Kopik, our assistant director for the DCI, is helping organize all of your breakout rooms. So thank you for everyone who's made this event possible today. And And then I wanted to emphasize tonight's event, as you all know, is free of charge. There's no tickets or anything, but we do hope and expect and request that you stick around if you can for the conversation. This panel here, this discussion is really to help you guys engage with one another, right? So they're going to have this discussion to kind of seed your conversations. So hope you can stay for that opportunity. And then in the interest of maximizing our time for this conversation and for your conversations, I'm not going to give like long introductions for our panelists. We do have their bios on your tables in front of you. And it's also on that link online that you can find. But very briefly, we have Shannon Klug, who is a former Air Force colonel, who's worked with Moms Demand Action, Be Smart, and Everytown's Veteran Advisory Council. So welcome, Shannon. We have Philip Smith, who's the president of the National African Americans Gun Association. Thank you for being here, Philip. And Ray Nostein on my right here. And I'm not sure how this is working. Hopefully it's working well. Who is a Future of Freedom Fellow and Senior Editor at a nonprofit focusing on state-level policy, and a former Second Amendment Research Fellow at the John Locke Foundation here in North Carolina. And then finally, Dominique Erdezane, who is a Research Fellow at Emory University and the author of a recently published book, One Nation Under Guns: How Gun Culture Distorts Our History and Threatens Our Democracy. And finally, we have Dr. Dan Aldridge, Professor of History, Chair of Africana Studies, and also a former DCI Deliberative Pedagogy or DEEP Collaborative Faculty Fellow. And Dr. Aldridge, as I learned in working with him, is part of the collaborative, hosts lots of debates in his history classes, American history classes, on some pretty contentious and interesting topics. So I thought he'd be a perfect person to moderate our conversation tonight. So a quick note about the format. We've tried to, as I said, not have a kind of row of panelists here, but a roundtable where they actually have a chance to talk with each other and not across or just out to you guys. So hopefully this will work well, and that they'll respectfully and authentically explore both their areas of agreement and disagreement, and model for us what good argument and robust civic dialogue looks like for you guys then to do it yourselves afterwards. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Aldridge.
Well, thank you for coming out this evening. And I'll just get right to the chase. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to respond to a general question about guns and gun rights before we proceed further. Start with Shannon. We'll go in this direction. Who, if anyone, should be permitted to own guns and why?
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is thrilling to be part of this discussion. I really feel like engagement is key to progress. And I am a gun owner and a supporter of the Second Amendment, but I do believe that we need to really consider very carefully who needs to have a gun and who can responsibly own a gun. And I feel like right now, what I'm seeing across the nation is we are unraveling a lot of those restrictions that had been in place earlier. So, I would like us to have a good, robust discussion, at in every state level about who really is responsible to own a weapon.
Hello. Okay. Thanks for having me here. First of all, I would say this. I want to make sure that I lay this out very carefully. I think anyone that can pass a background check is of age, depending on what particular state they are in, and is a law-abiding citizen, and I'm going to emphasize that, should be able to own a gun. We should not be forcing our citizens to not be able to access guns by accident or by intention. They should have the right to protect themselves at home or in the public space.
Is this if I were God question?
Yes.
Not a policy answer. My favorite answer to this was from Jodie Foster when she was giving an interview promoting the film The Brave One, kind of a vigilante movie, but also a critique in her view. And she said, I know I should only say this in Europe, but I don't think any living, breathing human being should own a gun. So if I were God, that would be my answer.
So I think I agree with Phil's sort of construct of anybody that can pass a background check. You want somebody who is a free person. If you look to the Bill of Rights, if you look to the Constitution, if you look to the commentaries, they talk about free people, right? The militia is among free people. And so I want free people who are not criminals, who are not felons, to be able to own a firearm.
So can I add something here?
Yes.
So my concern, and this is based on my military background, is I learned how to fire a gun in the military. I own a gun. I carried a gun in combat. And I am concerned about the citizen, the free citizen that can go out and buy a gun and go home with zero training on how to use that gun. And that's what concerns me about, the way things are today.
Yes.
I mean, I'd agree. I mean, I was giving a kind of blue skies answer to begin with, and I would obviously distinguish handguns from hunting rifles and shotguns, and certainly I don't think anyone should have an assault rifle. But I think yes, the context, and I'm not saying that constitutionally nobody has any entitlement, but the military, the issue that really defines my thought about gun ownership is military context. So it's not just the training that I would want people to be trained and skilled, but it's the context. And owning a gun or operating a gun under the authority of a militia is a very different thing from me just buying one for my own use. And that's where I'm a deep skeptic.
There's a little bit of context I think that should be added. It's a fact, and I think most studies, or especially recent studies, have shown that a firearm is used 5 times more to protect yourself or a loved one than it is to actually harm somebody. And then in some of those instances that they count for harming people are people being just protecting a loved one. So not all homicide is necessarily evil if it's for self-protection, if it's for preservation. In some instances, if it's the protection for home, like Castle Doctrine, which is very prevalent in most states. So I think you have to weigh there's trade-offs, right? If you're an economist, you understand there's pros and advantages. I do agree that a firearm can harm more people, but also if you scale up, it protects more people. Because look, just real quickly, and then I'm going to pass it to Asai, to kind of show that this is not a firearm problem, when there's a lot of stuff you see in the news. 2% of the counties in America are creating over 50% of the murders. That right there tells me right away that this isn't a gun issue. There's obviously tons of issues that go into crime, that go into attacks, that go into any sort of negative use of a firearm. So that stat right there tells me right away that we're not just dealing with a firearm issue here.
Any other comments from our panel on this question? Let me pose a follow-up. The United States has, I believe, the highest rate of gun deaths among Western developed countries by a pretty large margin. Yeah? And there are some neighborhoods and communities in the United States, to go to the point you mentioned before, that have gun death rates that, compared to places like Brazil and Jamaica, which are places that have extremely high gun death rates. Given the high rate of gun death rates in the United States, far more than our developed country peers, and higher than many less developed countries, how does this affect your views on gun ownership? Given all the homicides we have in the United States, would less gun ownership reduce the number of murders and suicides in the United States?
Are you looking at me?
Yeah.
Go first?
Whoever wants to go.
Do I go first every time?
No, you don't have to.
Okay. I don't believe that more guns make us safer, because I feel like we've got more guns, and so we've got more gun violence. I just think, and I do appreciate this deliberation guide, because, I didn't come prepared to throw out a lot of stats, and I think that your audience is prepared with all the stats, because you can throw statistics back and forth about this issue. But that's the one thing that I look at, that I think we have more guns and we continue to have more guns. We've got more guns in this country than we have people. And I don't believe that's making us any safer.
Other thoughts on this issue of the high crime rate? How do you correlate your position on guns with America's high homicide and suicide rates by gun?
I'll address this. If we are truly looking at a solution, and I think all of us in this room are looking at a solution, what really works, regardless of what party you're in, what your color, your sexual orientation, it doesn't matter. If we are truly looking at solving the problem, and I'm gonna be specific, if you're looking at that possibility of finding something that will work, you have to ask the question, why? And I'm gonna be candid with everyone here, why are Black folks and brown folks in various parts of the country shooting each other? Why? I'll tell you why. They're in social economic situations that are a no-win. They come from schools that are basically a pipeline to prison. They have I'm gonna say it's very common. They have a relationship with the police that is confrontational at best, and they have no social skills, no viable social skills. So what are you going to do if you're a mom at home with 4 kids, no husband? You're going to do whatever it takes to survive. You're going to rob, you're going to steal, you're going to sell drugs. And oh yeah, by the way, you're going to grab a gun to get some food on the plate for those kids at night, even if it means shooting and then sometimes killing someone. So the bigger question should say, if we love our country, and I think all of us in this room loves our country, what is the major solution or solutions, multi-layered, to solve that? I would think we need to start looking at the institutions that are in place and try to solve those one at a time. Otherwise, we can throw 1,000 laws at this issue and nothing's going to change. Those are my comments.
And following up from that, I mean, certainly the numbers of guns and the level of gun violence are closely related. It's not just that the United States leads in that category, it's accelerating at a frightening rate. I mean, we've had 123 mass shootings this calendar year. That's where there are 4 people shot. Mass shootings, if you go to the gun violence archive, mass shootings doubled between 2018 and 2023. Every 10 or 11 hours, a woman is shot in this country, shot dead by either a current or former intimate partner. Now, who are those people? They're law-abiding citizens. They are ordinary Americans killing ordinary Americans. One of my favorite books on this subject is by a woman called Pamela Haag, who wrote a book on the economics of gun selling in the 19th century called The Gunning of America. And she just says, you know, guns are agnostic. They don't care who you are. They don't care if you're a brilliant person, you're an elder in your church or not. They will just go off when they're asked to go off. And she talks about, you know, these heroic figures like Ida B. Wells, you know, standing up to the lynching culture, advising people to buy a Winchester rifle. And she says, look what happens in these communities that armed themselves against the other, against the police, against whoever. They end up shooting themselves. So I think that idea of the gun being agnostic is quite a helpful one, that brings us back to the fact that they are instruments of instant and distant death, as Senator Kennedy put it.
Ray, do you have thoughts on this issue?
I have a lot of thoughts. And, you know, one of the reasons that I'm pro Second Amendment is because as a Christian, I want to protect lives. I want to protect people. It's not just about rights, right? I mean, one of the things that does turn me off to some people in gun culture, you see these Christmas cards online, right? Politicians just showing their family with all kinds of weapons. But the reason I'm interested in this issue is because I'm interested in people, in protecting people, saving lives. I think one thing we learned from this horrific mass shooting that occurred at Nashville, at that Presbyterian school, was that the people that ran to the actual gunfire, the evidence shows, look, you're not going to like get rid of guns. I could magically say as God, I'll get rid of all guns in America. They would just come right across the border because drugs, you know, all the illegal guns are tied to drugs. But one thing we learned from mass shootings is that the way you stop and at least limit them is to run to the gunfire and incapacitate the person that is severely ill, that has serious mental issues, has a lot of anger, And so we saw that, I think, we lost lives in Nashville, but we saw people that were heroic that ran to the actual fire. So there's a lot of evidence. About 93 to 94% of these mass shootings are happening in gun-free zones because people aren't armed. Like law-abiding citizens aren't armed. They're not going to go into a gun-free zone because they follow the laws. And so I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that if you have people who are available to stop these people, that at least you have a tool, right? Would you rather, go to a school that had big said, no gun-free zone or teachers are armed? Me personally, I'd rather have teachers who are armed if they want to be. No mandate, no saying if the kindergarten teacher doesn't want to be armed, that's fine. But if people want to protect children and there's a tool to protect children available, then I want them to have that tool if they are so inclined.
Any thoughts about the arming of teachers and people? Most teachers are not trained to use guns or trained to be peace officers. Are there problems with arming sort of segments of the population, expecting them to sort of fulfill the functions competently of police officers or peacekeepers?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's an interesting stat that I think is very, very salient, because a lot of people think of concealed carry as being a bad thing, right? But concealed carrier holders are convicted of gun crimes 6 times less than police officers. 6 times less. That's pretty significant to me. That shows you it's so minuscule that they're law-abiding citizens, right? They're following the law. That's what they do. That's the least person I'm scared of in society, is a concealed permit holder. They've actually had training. There's actually great programs, Dan. Faster Colorado, that might be, if anybody's interested in this issue, is a group that trains teachers in classrooms. Because look, again, like I said, I don't want to monopolize any time, but the way to stop this, if it does happen, and there's layers, right? Guns are not the only way to stop. There's other ways to stop this. You lock schools down, you create security, you know who's coming into school, things like that. But one way to stop it is to incapacitate the person who's trying to harm innocent lives. And the best way to do that is with a firearm.
So my kids actually opened up my eyes to another angle of this that I had not considered. I'm not for arming teachers because I know how hard it is to fire at a target, especially one that's moving or shooting at you. Police officers can't even do it very successfully. Their hit rate's really low. But my kids, when I asked them about arming teachers, they were scared to death because they thought, with all the shenanigans that go on in a high school classroom, the last thing they wanted was a gun. Because there's always that one kid that's going to antagonize a teacher, or one teacher is going to lose it. And they were afraid of having a gun in the classroom because of what could happen between the kids and the student interaction, which is something I hadn't necessarily considered. So I think that's another piece to that argument, the discussion.
Any other thoughts on this issue? These would be arming teachers to prevent school shootings, or to at least foil more damage in school shootings.
Let me say this. I think we're at the point now where we have to arm teachers, like it or not. This is not America in 1950. This is 2024 USA. And for us not to be even thinking about arming a teacher, because I have kids, trust me, I have 3 children. If I know my kids are at school and I know a person is breaking in to kill them, I would at least have some level of hope that the teacher who had a gun could at least scare away or possibly stop the threat that was coming in to slaughter my child. I think it is very, very irresponsible, because you're not looking at the reality of the world in which we're in right now. The world right now is a very, very dangerous place. So to me, a teacher, if they want to, only if they want to, and they want to get continual training, they should be allowed to have a gun in that classroom. Because what is left as an option? The guy or woman comes in, slaughters my kids along with everybody else's kids, and we sit back and say, oh, woe is me. to me, that's not an option I think is that I can live with as a parent.
So can we circle back to your original question?
Yes.
Which was who should have a gun? Because we're talking about these people coming into our schools or our gun-free zones shooting us.
Mhm.
So who are those people? Should they be allowed to have a gun? How do we identify these?
Yeah, no,
people?
they shouldn't be allowed to have a gun, but the problem is they don't follow the laws. So when you implement gun control, there's actually a lot of data that shows the crime rate spikes as soon as you ban handguns or you ban certain firearms because you have basically passive victims and you have criminals who get access to the guns. Now, I'll pose the counter argument. So like a lot of politicians in Chicago say, well, all these guns are coming from Indiana, they're coming from different places. That's their argument, right? But the problem is their crime rate and murder rate keeps going up every time they ban guns. And so at least maybe it would flatline or, it would stay the same. The problem keeps showing is that the more firearms you ban, and this has happened in Europe, by the way, you had this UK, when they had their gun bans, Australia, when they had some of their gun buyback problems, you actually saw the murder rate soar because you have passive individuals. You can't get the guns from the illegal people because they don't follow the law.
Anything else on this issue? Dominic?
I think that there are a lot of things to say. Angela Stroud's book, Good Guys with Guns, where she's an anthropologist and a political scientist, and she tracked concealed gun carriers in Texas. She found that many of them, despite their title as law-abiding citizen, broke the law frequently and took their guns in places where they were not allowed and admitted to using them in illegal ways and in threatening ways. Many of the studies on these so-called defensive gun users have found that they've been in many cases criminal, but there's a larger question of what kind of a world do you want to be living in? Do you want your teachers armed? Do you want people waving potential threats away from their front lawn with the weapons? Do you want to be pointing a lethal weapon at people? I don't. The larger point is that this distinction between good guys and bad guys, law-abiding citizens and criminals, is an artificial one. I think that if you go back to the original political philosophy of republicanism, it holds that all men would be tyrants if they could. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. The understanding that humans are flawed, and you don't necessarily want to arm them. And if you look at modern psychology, you look at these classic works like Power and Innocence by Rollo May, he says it's not the bad guy you need to worry about, it's the good guy, it's the sense of innocence. James Baldwin says, no one is more frightening than the person who believes that in the purity of their own heart, because they're incorrigible. You can't argue with them. Hans Tock's book, Violent Men, one of his characters, one of his norms, one of his types of violent men, rather, was the norm enforcer, who's just a perfect suburban, clean-cut vigilante, someone who enforces the law as they see it. And these were people winding up in prison on homicide charges. So I would like to just dispel that dichotomy. And that's, until we realize that guns are dangerous and we're all dangerous, then we're not going to make progress.
Well, you anticipated my next question, so I will follow up with the rest of the group. Is the issue of the law-abiding gun owner. Let us presume, and I think this is true, most gun owners do not kill anybody with their guns. They don't kill themselves with their guns. That most gun owners purchase guns for legitimate purposes, used for legitimate purposes. Self-defense, which is legal and legitimate, hunting, target shooting, historical collecting, all sorts of reasons. Is it wrong to restrict the rights of the vast majority of law-abiding gun owners in order to, keep this dangerous tool out of the hands of a small minority who will misuse them? Is it unfair to the vast majority of perfectly law-abiding gun owners who use their guns for proper purposes? Anybody who wants to start.
I feel that given that the force of my previous statement, I should just say, yes, it is, because you never know. There's this brilliant dialogue between a senator and the NRA president, General Milton Record in the 1934, I think. And the NRA president keeps bringing the conversation back to kind of Dillinger and you know, the gangsters and the Tommy guns, and the senator interviewing him saying, well, how will we know? If I can ship a gun to Dillinger, I can ship it to you. How do we know that you're not going to break the law? And, you know, you say a tiny minority, but the numbers are high. You know, the numbers are rising by the day. We're talking about 300 people are shot in this country every day, of whom 127 on average will die. Those are staggering numbers. And, you know, it might be a tiny minority, but that's only because we've got 400 million guns, and we will never know who they will be. No psychological test could identify it. I'll let someone else jump in there.
Other responses on the law-abiding gun owner issue?
I think anytime you try to prevent citizens from accessing a gun, you are breaking the Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment is a living, breathing document. It is not static. It doesn't disappear at your whim. You cannot, in my mind, should be allowed to do that.
So I'm a gun owner and I have no problem with somebody asking me to register my gun like you would register my car. I don't have a problem registering my car. I wouldn't have a problem registering my gun. I don't see that as an infringement on my right. I wouldn't have a problem waiting a couple of days for a background check. I had to get background checked to be a Girl Scout troop leader. So it doesn't scare me. I don't feel like I need to be in a rush to buy a gun. There's an
Can I
argument.
address that question? And I don't mean to interrupt.
Okay.
I want everybody in the room to just think of this scenario. I'm thinking about that mother who is single in the hood, who needs to get a gun like ASAP because her next door neighbor has threatened her. Her next door neighbor has said, look, I'm coming tonight to get you know what. That's what I'm thinking about. She needs to get a gun like now. That 2 or 3 day delay is a life sentence for this lady.
But I'm concerned she doesn't know how to use it and she doesn't know how to store it. And so her kids are going to have access to a gun.
No,
She doesn't know how to fire it.
no offense, but that's a very middle-class perspective. Everybody in this room that lives in nice air-conditioned apartments that has security guards. You go to the store, security guards. You go to the nice private schools, you have security guards. You live in the hood, you are the security guard. And you're the security guard for those babies. And that's just being factual. So that 2 or 3 delay, no offense, because I think your heart's in the right place. But you should, anybody in this room should drive your car and go to the hood and walk around at 10 o'clock at night. Because you won't. Because you know it's dangerous. And you know you need to have a gun like now, not in 2 or 3 days. You need a gun now. So those are my comments.
Yeah, I would concur with Phil there because look, you know, there's also middle-class women who are stalked. And that stalker, it can turn bad quick. And so if you're talking about 2 to 3 days, by the way, the National Instant Background Check literally takes minutes. So thankfully, people don't have to wait days except for some state laws. But in most cases, in many states, the background check is done in minutes. And here's one problem, though, I do want to address about kind of just law-abiding citizens. I think we have to ask this question, what is our capacity for self-government? You know, we are people who are the government. We created the government. You know, the government didn't create us. You know, we're not, we're supposed to be the government, right? James Madison talks about in Federalist 46, he goes into why Americans have firearms and basically why the serfs in Europe don't, because they're not trusted by their leaders. But in America, the people are the government. And so I think if we're looking to the state and that great example that Phil used, where the cop, you know, law enforcement's great, but they're not really a first responder, you know, in a situation like that, where people's lives are in the balance. Cops are good at showing up at the scene after, you know, to recover bodies and to collect evidence. They're not, you know, I wish there was a cop with me every second of the day. That'd be kind of cool, you know, to have like a bodyguard, but most middle-class Americans don't have access to that. And so they have access to firearms. And so I think law-abiding citizens, it comes back to this just this question that I think we need to ask as a society: what is our capacity for self-government? We have to continually ask that in America. And I think in many respects we fail that, not just in firearms, but in other areas of life. And I think we need to kind of address some of those first principles more, where we say, what is our capacity for self-government? How can we come along, a young mom who's in the hood or is in a bad neighborhood, or, the gun control predominantly affects minorities, low-income people. That's who are most punished by most gun control measures. The data has said that for basically centuries. You can go back and read about black codes in America, about how southern states, well, not just southern states, almost all states, the first gun control laws happened before the Declaration of Independence in Virginia. It was about stripping firearms from freed blacks and slaves. That's the first gun control laws in America. It happened in Mississippi and Louisiana, happened all throughout the segregated South, where they would just go in. There's a great article. It's called The Klan's Favorite Law. It's on reason.com. You can just Google it. Great article. And it just goes through the whole history of gun control in America and how really it came about because of racist measures. I think people need to look at that.
I think kind of circling back to what Phil said is really important too at the beginning, is that we have some societal issues that we really have to solve. I wandered into the gun violence prevention movement in 2018 as a middle-aged, middle-class woman, definitely, like you said, with certain views. And it wasn't until I started working with some of the Black communities in Charlotte that they really opened my eyes to other issues and made me look at the Second Amendment a different way. Where I look at talking with some of these folks, I realized that they feel like maybe they do need to be the militia, the well-armed militia, because they see the state or law enforcement as others. They're not there to protect them. And so that really opened my eyes to some issues with guns and different communities and
Can I
how they
add a
view them.
point? I don't know if it's directly related, but I think it's relevant to everybody in the room, including the panel. Let's take somebody, guy named Joe. He lives in a neighborhood. Limited income, he might be retired, but he's in a rough neighborhood. He wants to go out and buy a gun. But in his particular state, due to gun control laws, before he can buy that gun, he has to take a class that's going to cost him about $250. Plus that, he has to take or pay for some type of certification that he's taken the class. So that $400 Glock or SIG or Canik, whatever he's going to buy, now becomes $1,200 or $1,000. You have now outpriced that person's ability to protect himself. And to me, that is a direct violation of the Second Amendment. We have to be conscious of what we're doing as a society and understand that our prism, our perspective is just that. It's our prism. It does not account for everyone else's reality in which they're living in. So I just want to make those comments.
I feel like there's a lot I'd like to respond to, and my brain's limited. The earlier point you were saying that it's a legal and legitimate thing to maybe to use your gun in self-defense. You go back to English common law, and the very idea of killing in self-defense has been trimmed back over the centuries to very limited contexts. You have a duty to retreat from danger, and only, not just a castle doctrine, but under certain circumstances within your home are you entitled to use lethal force because, as Blackstone puts it, that the law is so tender of life that it always presumes malice in those who take it away. Well, back in the 13th century, you get this thing called the Statute of Northampton, which is still valid in the US. And in this state, there was a famous case in 1843, which upheld the principle behind the Statute of Northampton, which is a sort of, by that point, an already 600-year-old law, basically saying that life is sacred, and you don't take life without extreme cause. So there's the issue of the sanctity of life. But you're talking about people being a free people. There's a danger, I think, here that we confuse the person with the people, because the Constitution never intended to authorize individuals to own weapons. People talk about the Second Amendment, the right, let's quote the whole thing. I mean, I tease my gun-owning friends in Atlanta and ask them, they say they're Second Amendment people. I've never met a single one who can quote it back accurately. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, if you're interested in the history of this, there are 7 volumes of the Anti-Federalist Papers edited by someone called Storing, and that's only a fragment of the debate. It is a massive debate. You can read 7 volumes running over 1,000 pages. If you can find a single argument for the individual ownership of a gun in there, I would like to know where it is. I'll give you a copy of my book, or some kind of prize. It's not there. You read the constitutional debate. They are not talking about gun rights. I thought, just out of curiosity, I'd do a Google search. You know, you can do the etymology search or exact phrase search. The phrase gun rights doesn't even appear until the 1980s. And of course, there were some legal rights to own guns, but it wasn't some kind of staple of democracy. It still isn't. So when people say they're into the Second Amendment, well, which militia, which state authorized and regulated militia are you serving in? Otherwise, the constitutional argument is moot.
Can I comment?
Go ahead.
quick? Great comments, Dominic, but I would push back with this.
I'm sure you would.
In love, it's all coming from love. In 2008, the Supreme Court did decide that people, in fact, do have the right to have their Second Amendment rights and that they can have a gun. So it has been constitutionally reaffirmed for the country. So that is the reality in which we are in right now. And that's why we're allowed to conceal carry in some places. We're allowed to purchase a gun. We're allowed to have constitutional carry because of that decision. And I think that was the right decision because as I said before, I'm not trying to be repetitive, but the Second Amendment is a living, breathing document. It does not die. It doesn't fall away.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think Heller is worth reading because I think it condemns itself. It's a very tortured piece of legal reasoning. I feel really bad being the salesman here, but I have a chapter on this called Death by Dictionary because it uses this method of using dictionary entries and looking up what does keep mean? It means to possess. What does bear mean? It means to carry. What's an arm? Oh, it's a firearm. It's a gun. Therefore, the Constitution wants us all to carry guns around. I found pieces in there that seemed like they'd been copied and pasted from kind of georgiacarry.org, complete with misspellings. The Huntley case, the North Carolina one, given that we're in North Carolina, I highly recommend just read the Huntley case because here's a case of 1843 where the judge is saying, you know, never may the day come where the citizens of this peace-loving state carry around weapons as a matter of course. And it says, you know, if you think you have a constitutional right, well, if you have a right to own a weapon to defend the state, how much more does that increase your guilt if you use it to the terror of your neighbors? So there's real clarity there. But in the Heller case, our friend Mr. Antonin Scalia just copies and pastes and sort of puts things in the wrong order. I mean, the basic structure of the ruling is to divide the Second Amendment in two and into an operative clause and a prefatory clause and take the last one first. It's a jumble. And for 200 years, federal law said the exact opposite.
It's been a while since I read the Anti-Federalist, but I would recommend reading them. Dominique mentioned them. It's great stuff. But I would just say that, I mean, the Bill of Rights to me is very plain, right? I mean, you have each right, and even Madison says this in the Federalist, but each right talks about individual rights. There's not, you know, the militia just meant free people. It meant free groups of people, right? Because the colonies, they were the American revolutionaries and later after the Constitution, they were fearful of standing armies. That's what they were fearful of. So they wanted standing militias in state, but they wanted free people armed. And that's, I mean, the commentary is all there. Joseph Story writes the whole commentary, which is mentioned by Dominic. He talks about the right to bear arms and firearms being the palladium of all liberties. I mean, it's a first principle. And so one thing I would just add to this whole kind of context of legal firearm owners is, I think that's one of the problems, and I respect everybody's view, but I think that's one problem that a lot of the gun control groups have, is they want to lump law-abiding citizens in with criminals. And they're saying like, well, you guys are like those people, or, you know, there's certain things we can't punish them, but we're going to punish you. And so I think ultimately that indicts itself. That's really the true indictment, because the problem is you just have, like you mentioned, 400 million guns in America. That's a lot. But you think of all the gun owners who never have any sort of incident with a firearm. To me, I want to reduce gun violence, but I do want to just point out a positive that happens, that we do have so many people who are very, very responsible, who are very cautious, and who are doing good to train their family and friends and things like that. I think that's a real positive that's happening in America right now.
Davidson College students.
And specifically, one of the co-presidents of one of our co-sponsors, the College Republicans, who will be followed by a student from the College Democrats. So, cool.
Hello, my name is Phil, Vice President of the College Young Republicans at Davidson. We met with our e-board, came up with a few questions, but I'm just going to pick one. So considering the extreme views of many mass shooters that's documented on social media and in personal manifestos, what role could a stronger institutional and societal emphasis on a shared morality have on reducing violent behavior and instances of individuals being pushed to extremism?
Well, I think just real quickly, and I'll let someone else answer. One of the problems that we have with violence is not firearms. I've heard John Lott talk about 90-something% of violent crimes actually don't involve a firearm. I know that's hard to believe because of our news and media, but it's like 93% of violent crimes don't actually involve a firearm. Doesn't mean that we can't do things to try to deter gun violence. But I do want to say, just kind of quickly, I think to me that jumps out a lot of times with crime, violence. A lot of this is family breakdown. I know that's kind of controversial today to say that, but I think lack of fathers in homes is a big key. I mean, one of the things that was essential for my life, even though my dad's not a perfect dad, he taught me gun safety from a young age, taught me how to shoot and handle a firearm. And to me, that had a profound effect. Is like, hey, this is serious stuff. And to have a dad to do that, not everybody has a dad. So, I'm not saying that you have to have a dad for that to happen, but it helps. And I think, just having strong family units can really transform society. And I think we've gotten away from that to such a big degree that it's almost clouded a lot of other issues that we're facing today.
So it's interesting. I liked your shared morality. So, thinking about if you have, there's that saying, like, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I feel a lot of times that's what we do with guns. If there's a conflict and you've got a gun, you're going to use it to resolve your conflict. So maybe the shared morality should not be, we're going to defend everyone's going to defend themselves with a gun. It's maybe you're going to have phenomenal conflict resolution and communication skills that you've learned in an event like this, right? To resolve conflict. And maybe that could be our shared morality, that like, we don't need to rely on the brandishment of a weapon to feel like we've defended ourselves.
I believe we have another question here. We have another questioner.
Okay. Hey, I'm Quentin. I'm with the Davidson Democrats. I just wanted to follow up on, I guess, the last answer and say, what do you do about people, the family units that have been disrupted by the guns? And if there is continual disruption of family units because of either going to prison because of using a gun, whether that's like law-abiding citizen using a gun and then going to prison, or a criminal using a gun and going to prison, they have a family. Yeah.
I'll respond. I think it's a very multi-layered question you're asking. First of all, there's no silver bullet answer. But first of all, you have to, as I mentioned very early in my first statements, socioeconomic issues affect families dramatically. Like my partner in crime up here said, lack of fathers, lack of family structure. You have kids that are now basically raising themselves out in society. They're angry because I talk to them every day. They want get back. They don't understand what they're going through. They often turn to the gun as a solution and we walk them down off of that. But you're talking about family structure, can we reach out to these kids? And they're young kids, 17, 18, 19, 2 and 3 felonies already. So you have to deal with that and be honest, we're missing that gap. And I think everybody on this panel has a good heart. We've had a chance to talk and I think everybody in the room has a good heart, but we have to look at the problems for what they are. We can't romanticize them. And sometimes it's an ugly picture that we're looking at. Kid has stabbed somebody. He's 19. He's at home. He's got 2 or 3 guns. He's got a Glock. He's angry. That child needs to be talked to immediately. Immediately. And I'm not talking about somebody coming off a nice, nice card walking into their home saying, giving all this fairy conversations. But we need to start looking at the problems that we have in America. Because I tell you right now, they're only going to get worse if we continue to have discussions or not have discussions. This is a great start. I've been on 100 panels like this, and typically you've never had a chance to talk to your folks that have a belief on the other side. So this is a great thing. And I think everybody here has a great heart. But we have to start looking at the issues that in the family to stop the problems. So.
Thank you. Do we have other questions from the audience? Oh, yes.
So Kevin here is one of our other co-sponsors from the College Libertarians. And he had opted out, but now he's opting back in. Yeah.
Well, this question is more geared towards the people that are pro heavy gun regulation. But sort of one of the common arguments you hear for sort of the right to bear arms is sort of the cases of like heavy tyranny and hegemony from the government. So how if guns are banned or like heavily restricted, what other choice do citizens have to fight back against a government who has a monopoly on deadly force?
You want to start?
Yeah, look at me. Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of it's difficult for me to unscramble the current arguments from original constitutional sort of reasoning, which is more to do, as Ray was saying, it's to do with an armed populace that could be organized into militias is the constitutional protection against a standing army, which is traditionally a vehicle of tyranny. It's a potential tyranny. We have different situations now, and everyone accepts the idea of a professional military, so that argument is sort of lost to some extent. I'm going back to Blackstone. He would say it's, rather than a fundamental right, this would be the fifth of his auxiliary rights and the sort of last resort situation when he says, when the being of the state is in peril, the people may be armed against rulers. But it's a kind of it's a far-flung scenario. In terms of now, I think the situation is so different. I mean, we have communities, we have police forces. I don't think that I don't know how, what vehicle those weapons should be utilized in if we're not members of the National Guard, the militias there. But the idea that individuals just spontaneously arise to oppose tyranny as they see it, I think is very dangerous.
Can I also address a little bit? So you were saying, heavy or gun regulations, and that's not me. I'm not asking to get rid of every gun. I'm a gun owner. I want to keep my gun. I like target shooting. Well, I think there's so much room in our country to just provide some guardrails and some legislation to just bring down the level of violence. So, Sheriff McFadden in Mecklenburg County, work with him. He's not a fan of gun buybacks. And the reason is, as the sheriff, he can't destroy the guns because North Carolina law says he's not allowed to. He has to sell them back. He doesn't want to put them back out into the economy. I don't blame him for that. So that's why they're not really big supporters of gun buybacks. That would be a simple regulation we could change that could reduce the number of guns out there that may be circulating that criminals could get a hold of or law-abiding citizens might get a hold of. There's just one simple thing that we could do. Laws about safe storage, right? So that we should make sure that people are storing their weapons responsibly. So far, 4 children in North Carolina in this year, 2024, have died because they unintentionally shot themselves with a weapon they found in their house because their parent did not keep it stored. 4 children did not need to die. You know, there are different rules and regulations that we can institute that's not going to remove every gun from every American, but I think can really bring down the violence. We need to have those conversations about what are those. Does an 18-year-old need to have a gun, or maybe a 21-year-old who needs to have an automatic weapon, who doesn't need to have an automatic weapon? I think there's a lot of room for regulation that doesn't, completely disarm our nation.
I believe you have another question from the audience. Is that correct?
We have time for one question. One more question.
My name is Jim. I used to be a chemistry professor here at Davidson 50, 60 years ago, and good to be back. First, I want to compliment you. Not once did I hear either of you, any of you, scream at each other. What's going on? What's happening?
We love each other.
30 days.
It was an intelligent discussion, mostly functioning on the fundamental of First Amendment, applying it to pistols and rifles, hunting and self-defense. But on top of that, what you just touched on this is the high capacity rapid fire weapon. Is that really different from a bazooka or a flamethrower or other weapons that are not generally allowed for the public? And so at least that ought to be discussed before we get into our discussions. Thank you. But thank you very much for being.
Yes.
I want to address that, and thank you for the question, sir. Does everyone know what an AR-15 is in terms of its structure, how it works? Let me explain it to you. I said this at the Senate, my Senate testimony, I'm going to say it again. It is a single action system. In other words, when you pull the trigger, one bullet comes out. The imagery that everyone who's not familiar with firearms thinks that when you buy an AR-15, that it is a machine gun that is used in the arena of war. It is not. It's a single action rifle, just like a shotgun, just like a pistol, just like a hunting rifle. There is no difference, the same process. But the imagery you see on TV, all that stuff, it gets flooded in your mind that this is a machine gun. That is not true. I will say this, of all the, and I use the 2021 survey information in terms of gun violence, 48,000 deaths in 2021. Only 2% were used by AR-15s. That's 661. So my question would be this. It's a lot. I'm not trying to diminish that, but I'm not going to inflame it either. If you're really focused on changing gun laws, and this is for my brothers and sisters on the other side, look at the other overextending issues that are important, because focusing on the AR-15, you're not going to win there. There's 20 million AR-15s in circulation right now. 20 million. 14 million Black folks have guns right now. You're not going to win that argument. So focus on things that are real, not perceived. Thank you.
And I think that's a great point to stop. This conversation could go on for maybe hours, but we want to make time and make space for you all to talk with each other, to follow up on the conversation that you've just heard. Okay, hello, welcome back, everyone. I hope your conversations were all fantastic and interesting and engaging and productive. And we have our friends here still in person. We have, as you can probably see, we have about 11 groups here, 11 tables in person, and then about 8 groups online. I think we had almost 170 total, both in person and online. So for a fantastic evening. Thank you all for being here. I have a couple words just before we end. So first, on your tables in front of you is that QR code, please flip it over and it should say post-event survey. So take your computer, your phone, take a picture, click on the link, and there's a survey there that gives you some questions, including some questions about your deliberation guide and whether that was helpful. Those deliberation guides are written by us. And in this case, several students helped us write those, as well as Dr. Kopik and myself. And so, so we want to get your feedback on it. A couple sort of things I think we want to emphasize before we end. So first, we think and we really believe that this kind of deliberation is critical, is foundational to democracy. But it's also not enough, right? Talk is important, but it's not sufficient. We also need to work together as citizens to solve some of these problems, to go out and take action. So after all of our events, all of our small group discussions, we share something called a Pathways Guide, which lists a whole bunch of options, nonpartisan, bipartisan, multipartisan pathways that you can take to learn, to connect, and to engage with this issue that we've talked about tonight. So watch out for that. We'll be sending that to you very soon. And they're, of course, always optional. It's up to you, but we want to give you those options. And then I want you to encourage to sign up for more events like these. So we're going to continue. This is our last major event of this semester, this season, but we'll be doing more next year. And so if you haven't, please sign up on our website for our updates. I think when you signed in, you had the option to opt in to join that newsletter. It goes out once a week and shares blog posts from our fellows and announcements about our events. And then also, we host what we call deliberative D teams, so small group discussions. Some of you have participated in these. These meet for 2 hours, 3 times in a semester to talk about more in these topics in depth. So we've done guns in that session, but you talk about for 2 hours instead of 1 hour. You get to go more in depth. We've done immigration, we've done abortion, we've done climate change, and we'll do a lot more interesting topics next year. So watch out for announcements about that. And then we also have speakers who come to talk about deliberation-based topics. And so on that, I want to just end with some thank yous. Thank you again to all the staff and colleagues who've helped make this event successful, including putting together this stage, and all of our facilitators. If we can give a round of applause for all of our facilitators. And then also to thank once again our panelists. Thank you so much for kind of leading the way in this conversation and providing us with a lot of things to think about. So thank you all again. So. And then, as I always do, I want to thank all of you and all of you online who are with us for being here, right? On a Tuesday night at 9 o'clock, you are doing the work of democracy. You are doing the work of citizenship, of deliberation, of engaging with these really hard questions that many of us are afraid or have given up, right, on engaging because they're difficult, because they're emotional, because they're challenging. But it's because of those reasons. That's why we have to engage with them, right? We have to try to figure out how we can come together and at least understand why we have these differences, and then maybe transcend those differences with some new solutions, some new ideas that can help make our future better. So thank you all. A round of applause to all of you for being here. And with that, we'll hang out for a few minutes, but for now, our forum is adjourned. Thank you so much for being here.